Hi, everyone. Welcome to the new year and to the first in our series of 2018 Tap the Tap webinars. We're here with Tony Edgerton, who's the grant accountant at Sierra College. You all know her well. And Tony's going to be taking us through fiscal guidelines for quarterly and annual reporting. So this will give you a heads up on where we're going to be working over the next 6 months or so to the end of the fiscal year. Before we start, we'd just like to give you a quick update on several of the things that are going on at the moment. Salomon's with us here and he's going to jump in wherever necessary. So once again, there we go. So once again, welcome back. Thank you to all the colleges who have submitted their second quarter reports, which were due earlier this week. If you are having any problems or any questions submitting information for the reports, please contact us as soon as possible. We'll be giving you some feedback coming soon. We'll be contacting you directly. We're particularly interested in how you're reporting on how you're reaching your outcomes in your work plan. And particularly, especially in the light of today's webinar, how your spending is going and the challenges and opportunities that you're currently facing. So we'll be in touch with you. Thank you very much for those who have gotten the reports in early even and on time. And just another reminder, please jump in and start using the workplace resource. We're posting more and more of our information directly onto workplace, and many of the colleges are sharing the excellent work that they're doing, including curriculum and other resources. So if you're not engaged on workplace, please jump in there and start checking in there regularly. Another reminder to the website, your college page on the CCC Maker website is a great opportunity for you to showcase what you're doing in your project. Want to make sure that everyone is updating their page. If you have a look on on the website, you'll see that many of the colleges are doing some great stuff. They've got their Kumu map up there. They've got excerpts from some of the work that they did in their implementation plan. So their philosophy, their objectives, etc., are all there. So their blog posts are connected. So please, let's get on that as quickly as possible. We know that this is an open forum, and we want to make sure that when people come to the CCC Maker website, they're really getting an idea of the level of activity and engagement that you're achieving. We'd also like you to send your 10 best photos to a Dropbox file that I've started because we're publishing a CCC Makerspace guide for other colleges that are starting makerspaces, and we'd like to be able to illustrate the work of that guide with your real-time photographs of the work that you're doing. So please send us the photos and we'll make sure that we can include as many of them as possible. And finally, we've also got a series of visits that Salomon and I will be scheduling over the spring and the summer. So I was fortunate enough to be able to visit City College of San Francisco last week for their Flex Day and to see the great spaces that they're putting together for their Makersphere. So we'll be in touch with you to schedule those visits. Upcoming events, congratulations to Cabrillo College. They have their grand opening for their Makerspace this Saturday, which is really great, and really impressed that they did a number of sneak peeks. So they did open house events prior to this grand opening. So they've really been able to use this process as a way of outreaching to the community and really raising the profile. We have the Link to Learning convention coming up in Orange County in, oh, I'm sorry, that's supposed to read February 12th to 14th. Glendale Community College is volunteering to help man the 5,000 square foot makerspace that they're temporarily setting up for that convention. So if you know of other people who might be interested in participating, please let us know and we'll put you in touch with the organizers.
Yeah, if there's anyone down in Orange counties as well, I haven't reached out to some folks. But if you're down there in the 13th, I believe it's the February 13th date is the main day that we're looking for students or even staff there that are helping in your makerspaces to just represent our initiative to a lot of K through 12 districts who may be interested in making in their respective districts.
Great. And then actually, Salomon, do you want to follow on with the next one?
Next week, we have a very important webinar for everyone. This is the internship rollout from the foundation's office point of view. So all the necessary paperwork and the onboarding of students and employers that everyone will be responsible for will be discussed. And this is, once again, after the contract the Career Catalyst is going through its processes, which in itself I know is a task that some of you have been tackling as of lately. So please reach out to me specifically if you have questions regarding that contract. I can help not only help you understand it a bit, help your fellow business staff understand it a bit so that it can be expedited as quickly as possible so you can get to the richness that will be discussed next week, and that's the onboarding of your students and employers through their Career Catalyst online platform. So please join us next week to get more hands-on application for this particular aspect of your internships.
Great, thanks. Just another reminder, we have the symposia coming up in Southern California on March 16th, in Northern California on April 13th. We will be following up with the colleges to solicit presentation ideas so that we would like to really share out the work that you guys are doing in your makerspaces with our community of practice, and to showcase some of the work that you're doing in preparation for developing academic papers and other presentations for other conferences. So this is a valuable opportunity for all of the project leads and team members to think about how you would present the strong features of your project, what makes you unique, and how you're really creating new solutions to the challenges of setting up makerspaces so that we can help the larger community in addition to our community of practice within CCC Maker. And also a great event that's coming up towards the end of April, College of the Canyons, Allen Hancock and Moore Park, together with numerous other community members, K through 12 groups, are putting together a regional maker fair, which is quite extraordinary. I think we're very interested to see how the organization and planning for this is developing, and I believe it's going to be a great event. Salomon, I think you were in on a preliminary call as they're organizing. Do you want to?
Yes, absolutely. That's a regional maker fair that they're organizing, not only local K through 12, local community colleges, mostly in the Ventura area, northern LA County area, as well as Cal State University, Channel Islands, which is close to that area as well. So it's going to be a large event, and they're doing the meetings and discussions of many logistical aspects to this. So it's important for them to learn how to put this together and learn together what the maker movement is for that particular region as they define it. So it's quite exciting for them. So congratulations to the team, Ron, who's leading that charge there, College of the Canyons, and the folks participating.
Yeah, we're all going to learn a lot from their experience, and I'm looking forward to hearing what they've, their successes and challenges as they've put this together. So it's very exciting. Okay, so I'm sorry, we seem to have lost a key slide there. But Tony, are you ready to jump in?
I believe I'm ready. Hello, everybody, and thank you for having me. I'm nervous because I haven't done this live. I've done a couple recorded, so bear with me as I go through this information with you. If you have questions, you can type them in, and then I'm gonna try to wait till the end because I think that some of the questions will be answered in later slides or discussions throughout the webinar. And if I don't have the answer today for your questions, I will get the answer back to you. So go ahead and keep those in mind and type them in. So let's get started. So this is the first slide is just how the seed grant went and how the spending played out for the seed grant. As you can see, we had about 64% with the materials, services, and capital outlay. But that is a little the numbers. And then the next slide I have is a chart, if you're more into charts, of how that all played out with the seed grant spending. Everybody was reported, and most everyone utilized the funds. There wasn't very much left on the table, so that was great that everybody had that opportunity to use that. And then I did a little, the next slide is how we have budgeted for the implementation grant. So these are the numbers for the implementation grant year 1 with the 24 colleges, about half in services and capital outlay. And as you can see, the other, now this was as of January 11th. As budget transfers come in, it might change a little, but the work plans and things won't change, and we'll get into the budget transfers on that. And then the next chart shows a little pie of how the implementation grant is expected to be budgeted, is budgeted and spent at this time. So you can kind of see a visual, and this will of course be in my Dropbox for you to view later, and I believe on the CCC Maker website they should have a link to that after we're done. Of the budget, just so that you know where we're at, the Q2 reports were due on the 16th, which I believe was Tuesday, and I've received about half of the uploads, and to date we're at about 8% expense. So we will go into what we need, where we need to be at the end of the year as far as expenses. I believe that Dropbox, my due date was the 16th, and then I kind of put a few days on it. So you may have received an email saying that it was the 19th as far as the due date for the second quarter report. It was the 16th. But if you haven't done that, please get that into me before the end of day tomorrow, because we have to have a reporting. Even if you had no expenditures in Q2, I need that acknowledgement from you showing you know your budget and that you had no expenditures, and sign off from somewhere there at your college, so we all know where we're at, and if you need help we can reach out to you later. So that was on the implementation budget. We're going to go on the next slide, some of the upcoming due dates for the next reporting. So this is year 1, and they go by the quarters. So we just finished the first 6 months ending December 31st. As I said, was due January 16th. Now this next third quarter, I'm hoping we have more expenditures. I've added a little form. We're going to start with that, and we're going to talk about more later in the webinar. Is the carryover with a spending plan is going to be due with your third quarter report. And in addition, we'll go over the match reporting, the fiscal match reporting, which will be due at the end of the year. So I will go over that. Again, this is available in Dropbox with all the other source documents that I have there. So if you have any questions. So just so you're not confused, there are 4 quarter reportings and then a final report, and we'll get into the final report a little later, but that's just your very last chance for accruals if you have equipment that arrived the end of June, but you want to count them in the 17-18 fiscal year as an expense. You'll be working with your business office to do that. So that's why we have the final report July 13th, but the fourth quarter report due June 15th. So we're able to capture everything and get the narrative and the match all done in July. So we'll go through those documents. So we can go to the next slide. So the quarterly reimbursements, we've gone through 2 of these now. We've had the seed grant reimbursement, the carryover, and now the second quarter. So you guys are all very familiar. To use the reimbursement template I have in Dropbox, I did have a question on one of the categories, the 7,000, which is other outgo, and a couple of you have approved that in your budget for a small improvement or something like that to your space. So I updated that template. If you have expenses in your 7,000s, that should be there ready for you to use. Again, the reimbursement at this point, we're on a pure reimbursement basis only, which are for actual expenses. Do not include encumbrances on the reimbursement only actuals, and include your fiscal reports and backup. I'm getting very good backup documentation, and I may have a question every once in a while. Everybody's fiscal software is a little bit different, so I'm trying my best to decipher them when I have questions. But if I email you, it's just a question. Me trying to get used to 24 different reports, and just might need a little bit of help from you on that. So it is very important, though, that I do see that expense posted on a ledger or a summary or something that matches with the receipt and the PO. And that's why I'm asking for all that documentation, so we can, just verify, here's the receipt, this is what it was charged to, and so forth. So with the quarter 2, since you've already received a 10% advance, if by the second quarter you did not exceed that advance, you will not be receiving additional funding until you've spent more than the 10%. So there's a section on the template that says how much have you received to date. And that's me also, you verifying that you have received the 10% advance. Your business office has posted it because sometimes a couple of you have had checks get lost or they didn't get posted to the right fund. So you need to verify, yes, I've claimed this much, I've received the 10%, and some of you did have a quarter 1 payment. So that's me knowing that you're acknowledging you've received that and calculating what your next reimbursement should be. So if you have any questions on the template, let me know. Again, this is in Dropbox under Forms, and anyone is accessible to Dropbox. I just need an email address to share that file. We have about 118 shares on that Dropbox. So somebody there, and if you don't have it, somebody there at your college should have that. Okay, so the next thing I want to go into is the budget transfer. So some of you are realizing that what you thought was going to be a material and supply, really qualified for a capital outlay expense in the accounting world and whatnot. So I developed a budget transfer form, and I wanted to clarify the reimbursement that you're allowed cannot exceed more than 10% of each category in your approved budget. So if it's within a 10%, you can go ahead and post the expense, but you do have to be careful, because in the end, when I'm going to cut your reimbursement, if I see you don't have if you've done a bunch of small budget transfers and you didn't really realize they exceeded 10% of the approved budget, it could get you into trouble, and we'll have to do one at that time. But so my advice to you is, if you see movement, to go ahead and submit a budget transfer form to me, and then our budgets will be in line, and there won't be any questions at the end of the year if you're allowed for reimbursement. So that form is in the Dropbox. It's a budget transfer form, and you fill it out. It's in Excel. It calculates everything on there for you. You show me your current budget, what you want to transfer in what category and why, and is it changing your work plan. And my goal is to turn that around within 48 hours back to you, so I'm not delaying your processes. Now, if you're totally changing your work plan, it may take a little longer. I'll forward those to Deborah and Solomon for their review. But I had a question, like somebody thought it was going to be a classified employee. Well, it ended up being a contractor. So they had to move it from a 2,000 category to a 5,000 for a consultant. It didn't change their work plan, but it was a significant shift in their budget. So that did require a budget transfer. So we have on the form, the 1,000s is represent instructional salaries, 2,000s non-instructional, 3,000 your benefits, the 4,000s your materials and supplies, your 5s are your operations, consulting, those things, and then the 6,000 is your capital outlay, your major equipment purchases. And now I've added the 7,000 since that question came up since I made this. So if you have an improvement to your makerspace, it may be categorized as the 7,000. So check with your business office, but that's now one of the categories on the approved budget transfer form. Okay, so let's go through. I kind of just explained this. I'm getting ahead of myself, it seems like, but just so to give you an example, if your approved budget is 25,000 in materials and supplies, and you need to move 3,000 of that to capital outlay, that would require a budget transfer. It exceeds 10% of your approved budget, so send me that form. If it's not, if it's just $400, you don't need to do a budget transfer. But just keep in mind later on down the road, if you do a budget transfer, take a look at your budget, what your actual expenses are, and go out and try to get everything you can to plan for your expenses so you don't run into a situation where it's Q3 and the budget transfer wasn't approved, but now you have more than 10% in capital outlay that you've already expended. So we're trying to keep this down to one budget request transfer per quarter. I just got this form out a few weeks ago, so if you need one now and then you're going to need one when you are done analyzing, I'm fine with that. I will work with you. It's just that as we go forward in the slides, things take longer than expected, so we should be thinking of these right now and kind of limit the budget transfers to speed up the process of you being able to get on with your makerspace and your spending. So that's why we're trying to just keep it to one per quarter. But I'll work with you if you have any questions. Just let me know. And on the next slide is actually a snapshot of the budget transfer request form. And up in the top, I have all the directions that you need to follow, what, cells you're going to fill out, what you're going to put in. You're going to put in your current approved budget and where you need it to be budgeted. So it's pretty self-explanatory. I did get this approved through Matt Roberts, our monitor with the Chancellor's office, so he is good with this form. And as I said, it'll go through me, and then if I feel it needs further review, if it's looking like a major change, I'll have Deborah and Solomon review it. But if you have any questions on this form, I've only had a few. If it's not making sense, let me know, because if you have a question, then others will have a question, and I want to make it as easy as possible to get moving so we can be spending and utilize your funding here by the end of the year. Okay, so that kind of goes right into the spending is going to drive your action for your plan. So we are only allowed 10% carryover, which is going to need approval, and it has to be spent within the first quarter of the next fiscal 18-19 fiscal year. So this means by June 30th, 90% of your budget needs to be spent. I'm getting I haven't spent anything yet, so it's just like, okay, well, we need to get moving on. I know you have a lot of plans in process, but it's only 10% of this first year allocation will be allowed to carry over, so we need to use it. And this is going to be actual charges through June 30th, so just keep that in mind. You don't want to wait till the last minute and make a purchase on June 29th, and it's probably not going to get through the accounting system in time for it to be counted in 17-18. We kind of experienced some of that with the seed grant and the deadline there. This should be a little bit easier concept because it's June 30th and we're all used to everything ending June 30th with our fiscal year. So we'll just go to the next slide. This is kind of leading up to the final report and the last expenditures. So when you submit again in June 30th expenses, again, no encumbrances, no pending CalCard charges. Some of the colleges, it seemed quite a delay, like up to 2 months for their CalCard charges to actually show as an expense on their ledger. So I was able to work through that with a couple of you as far as they can accrue the expense with a bookkeeping entry, and it will post before June 30th. But just make sure that you work with them, because if it's not an easy thing for them to do, or, you know, they're like, you know, no, you got your receipt in late or whatever, you know, just, I don't know, everybody's situation's different, but just be thinking about it ahead of time. And if you have an equipment purchase, the equipment must be received by June 30th. You can accrue the expense. You can get the invoice in July, but as long as it's received and the bookkeeping entries done in June, it can be a 17-18 expense to be claimed. So I would make a good friend in the business office. And we went ahead 2 slides. Go back. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Because they can help you. We can coordinate it, and I'm easy. We can talk on the phone. Call me. I try to be at my desk for questions, especially when it's time to report or have questions, and I will get right back to you. So again, at that last bullet, accrued the expense, so it posts in the current and the correct year. Your purchase orders for your equipment, you know that they will take longer than you think they will. So those should already be in process right now. Okay. So looking ahead, when you're done, when we do this next quarter, which I'm hoping a lot of expenses come in, at that time, you're going to look at your expenses and your carryover to plan for your submitting your carryover request form at the same time. It'll be 10% of your allocation maximum. And when we do that, we're going to go into, we'll have to amend the contracts and things like that, but I'm not putting a lot of restrictions on your carryover spending, and we'll get to that form in just a moment. And just so that you know, the year 2 work plans are going to be due May 4th. Deborah and Solomon will be having more to come on that piece of information. Those will go through them, but that's something to put on your calendars also to start planning for year 2. Okay, so we can go ahead. So the carryover request forms in Dropbox, it's going to be due April 16th with your submission of your 3rd quarter report. It's going to require approval, so Carol Pepper Kittredge will be approving these, and then Jen Ulrich will be sending an amendment of the contract. The carryover must be spent within the 1st quarter of the next year. So I know I'm repeating myself, but as I said, the expenses have to be posted by September 30th, 2018 on the carryover. And those should be separate, separate allocations. You know, you won't commingle it with your year 2 allocation, just for simplicity and keeping everything straight on your end so you know which part you're spending. So the carryover, once you've expended that, is going to be due. That reporting will be a separate report, but it'll be due with quarter 1, just like the seed grant. The seed grant, the final report was due when quarter 1 of the current year was due. So I'm trying to make the due dates all the same, just so they can get everything done and then get on with, you know, your work and your planning. But I have another slide that kind of shows the carryover request form next. Oh, well, maybe I didn't. This is going into the match. The carryover request form is in Dropbox, and it's all these forms are already in Dropbox if you want to go in and take a look at them. And again, if something doesn't make sense, please let me know. So the match report is going to be due in July 13th with your final report. So you're required to match $1 for every $3 in awards, and you had a match plan submitted, approved, and it's sent back to you with a letter of approval of your budget. So you should already have an idea of what your match dollars, where they're coming from. And I was able to get this approved also by Matt once we go to the form. I don't need like reports on every matching dollar, which is great. However, when I am audited, if our auditors are going to request further documentation from you, then I'll reach out to you to get that. So you have other grants at your college that require match, so go with that process within your college. We'll go to the template in just a moment. It's like I said, going to be due the end of July 13th. So Deborah, if you could forward to the next slide. So here's what the match form looks like. And when I say identify, it's that source name. It's your fund, whatever your designated fund number in your financial software is what I want there in the source name. And then a description or the service and a dollar amount that was attached to the value of that match. And there was some questions regarding the volunteer hours and putting a dollar amount, because they're capturing your volunteer or your outside hours in your narrative. So we're going to put more information to help you do that calculation and fill in this form when you do your fiscal match reporting. I didn't quite get all that together yet, but I will be sure to put that out there. And another goal that I have is to create a tool for you when you're doing your carryover requests, so that will help you, plan for your carryover and where you need to spend it. I thought I had the carryover request form snapshot in here, but I didn't see it. But maybe to help you feel a little better, the carryover is not going to have to, at the time when you're planning your carryover, you can just put it where you need it at that point, because we're not going to go through the approved budget and see how much you've spent of each category. So that's at least a little bit of hopefully will be helpful. But this match will be due, and if I have questions on it, as I said, if the auditors ask for additional backup, I will be coming back to your institution and having them provide it. And it specifies all that in the top left-hand corner on the instructions of what documentation is required. So basically, I'm just going to need this form, but you will need to keep the backup at your, at your site with your business office in your file with all the other information you have on your implementation grant award. So let's see, what do we have next? Oh, so Dropbox, just to remind you, everything's in Dropbox. There's the Appendix C guideline. I have a link from this, which goes directly to the Chancellor's office with allowed expenditures. The forms. I did add the Chancellor's office out-of-state travel form to my Dropbox. The form that the Chancellor's office, it wants you to fill out this form, which some of you have done, and I've seen it in your submissions, but they will send you an email confirmation back that it's approved. When you submit that with your quarter report, if you can include that email confirmation, then I know that, it was actually submitted and approved. I mean, it's just helpful for me to see that, yeah, because Matt Roberts has to approve those. So if you have out-of-state travel, just keep that in mind to send that into him if you know something's coming up in the spring for out-of-state. Even if you have it next fall, I think there's particular things that go on at the same time in the year. Go ahead and send it to him, and then just hang on to that email and submit that with you. So I've created a communications folder. So when I sent the Dropbox file request, I typed out all these instructions, and then Dropbox kind of like crunched it all together. So I made a Word document in there that you could print out and have at your desk when you're preparing these reports. I've done the updated timeline with the new carryover request form and the match deadline. And again, I'll have this PowerPoint and webinar links will be available in Dropbox as well and on the CCC Maker website. And if you have anyone else that wants to be able to access the Dropbox, just send me their email and I'm happy to share that with them. So that was a lot of information. I feel like I talked a lot, but hopefully that is kind of helpful for you to plan. I'm really hoping Q3 is a lot of expenditures. We're only at 8%. It's a very short time frame for this grant to all come together with a lot of stuff to do still ahead. So hopefully that will show more expenses and come out, and we'll be in a great space for everybody to use all these dollars that are so nicely available to us. So I will try to attempt to answer your questions. Were there any questions?
Absolutely. I can help you, Tony, to cue you up there. So thank you very much for going through this and guiding us through this process, which many of our folks online will be gracious enough to accept the help, because there's a lot of deadlines on the fiscal side as well as the programmatic side that they have to keep on top of. So here's a couple of questions for you that I think would answer. And if anyone else has any questions, please type them into the chat box so I can queue them up. The first question that came up was about matching being quarterly or annually. And I can maybe begin answering that, and then I'll cue it over to you, Tony, because some folks did see quarterly metrics in their recent reporting that alluded to matching, right? There was in-kind, college contribution, volunteer hours, employer hours, and that may actually aggregate to a yearly matching report, which is really what you spoke about. So I wanted to clarify that the quarterly reporting is in a way to get you prepared, to get you thinking about it, to get you somewhat accumulating in a sort of say a soft launch of your matching. But the real report is a yearly one that Tony discussed a little bit further. And if you can just clarify the purposes of the matching for your reporting, Tony, so that they understand the difference of the yearly matching versus the quarterly.
Right. So my reporting to the chancellor on this grant is biannually. Some of them are quarterly, but this is biannually. And at the end of the grant, at the end of the year, I have to report the matching dollars to the chancellor's office with my annual report. So that's why I'm collecting this. I am fairly new to the college system, and I'm working on a few other grants, and all the other grants that I've seen, the match is done at the end of the grant period, the fiscal match reporting that they've asked for. So that's when I'll need it, is at the end of this year and then at the very end of the grant, but it's going to be matching just that current year's award. So right. I think that like Solomon said, if you're using that narrative match question, that'll help you start thinking about how you're going to fill out my form, which will be submitted and used. If an auditor comes in, then they will want to see that documentation and could even ask for more documentation. So I'm actually trying to make that easy on you, but just remember, you have to keep good documentation with your business office. If I come back to you and they want to see that type of proof on a fiscal report, it's probably unlikely that would happen, but it could happen. So just make sure you keep all that fiscal documentation. But I think Deborah and Solomon's request on matches to keep you going, keep you thinking about it, keeping it documented, and then when you get to the year end on my report, you could go back to those and look what you submitted, and it will help you fill out my report.
And I think what's important that you mentioned, Tony, is that their yearly matching that they submit needs to be auditable, so they have to have the report for that. Versus the quarterly report, they can submit what they're currently doing as they prepare for the documentation, or let's say they don't have documentation for some of the aspects of matching the reported on the quarterly reports, then they probably shouldn't submit it to the yearly one, because the yearly one is the auditable record of their matching, which is distinct.
Right. So audits are done in two processes. They come in and they start the audit in the fall, and then they end it in the spring. And at any time they could ask for additional documentation, paperwork, and just, I mean, so you know why I'm asking for all this documentation is so that we're doing our due diligence, and I'm not having to come to your site and, you know, pick things to audit. And so it's so easy to do now that we have all this, you know, PDF and scan and Zoom. It's awesome. So it's actually saving money. I know it's a lot of work, but there's a reason for it, because I will be deflecting most all the questions with the day-to-day expenses you're turning into me. But with the match, you need to be very, you know, keep those records and keep them in the folder that proof the that prove the expenditure match with that.
Thank you, Tony, for
Sure.
that one. There's another question also related to the 10% carryover that came in. The question was, if they request the 10% to be carried over after this fiscal year, do they have to stop spending at 90%? In other words, since the form is due kind of before the end of the fiscal year, they may, you know what I mean? Do they have to stop?
Absolutely, yes. Spend as much as you can. Okay, so kind of, maybe I shouldn't be saying this. Request the 10%, have a plan for it, let's get that in work. But if you end up spending 95% of your grant by the end of the year, that's awesome. You're only going to carry over what's left of your allocation, regardless of what you asked for. Definitely do not quit spending that.
Okay, that was good.
To, you know, you can request the 10%, and then if you don't need it, if you've spent 100%, you're in great shape. But
right.
Yes, continue on with your expenditures.
Right, just don't spend more than that, right?
Exactly. Don't spend more than that in this year, because it'll have to come from, you'll be using that as match.
Right.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate that the way that Tony is setting this up is, if everyone submits for that 10% carryover, then you're covered. It's like a form of insurance, right? So that if you don't, you may not need it, and that's fine. But if you fill out the form and get it started ahead of time, then you're covered.
Yeah.
So and that's very considerate on Tony's part. She's really looking out for you.
Absolutely. And this one that I know we kind of preempted in our preparation talk, so it was asked, and how are we going to handle the personnel time card expenses that typically hit after June 30th?
So if you have that situation, I will work with you. My director is, she understands that you can't help when payroll posts to your ledger. If you're going to have that situation and you know that for sure, then please reach out to me. You can plan that as your carryover, but if you find yourself that you want to have carryover and your June payroll expenses counted in 17-18, we can work together, but it's going to take more, it's going to take probably a little bit more hand-holding on my part so that I can understand what part of it was your June payroll and what part of it is your carryover. So,
and just to explain to folks that maybe have never dealt with this aspect of our wonderful fiscal processes.
Yeah. So you have employees that work through June 30th, but they don't get the check's not cut until July 10th. So it is a 17-18 expense. That's when they did the work, but it doesn't post to your ledger until July. So we understand that. I will work with you. I may have to, it's kind of difficult because I have to report in July, so that July 13th, I believe, is the last cutoff. If you find yourself in that situation where you have a July 10th or later payroll that's for your work done in June, then reach out to me and we'll work through that. It
Right.
doesn't have to necessarily be part of your carryover, but it can be part of your carryover if, you know, if you find that happening. It's a little bit confusing. It's not like a accrual where you can just do a bookkeeping entry, because payroll accountants, the payroll runs when it runs. Your system's already set up for that. So I realize that. I've had that question asked already. I'm willing to work with you. It's just going to take us coordinating that at the end of the year so that we can maximize that.
And
Maybe put in a different year coding on it or something like that.
And the next question, Tony, related to this concept that I know we discussed about the fourth quarter report versus the yearly report, and when is it that the 90% needs to be accounted for the expenditure?
So if I understand, so what seems to happen is June 30th comes, and then, you know, you had things that post through June 30th, but your accounts payable is still working through the invoices in July. Most of you don't close your books until August. They backdate the expenditures. So that's why I want to get what you have through June 30th. I think that date was...
And you're referring to the yearly report here, because the Q4 is due a little bit earlier.
Correct.
In June, correct?
So,
and the
yes.
yearly is due July.
Yeah, that is correct. So the July is just to make sure we got everything. Like if there was a last minute expenditure that you didn't send me in June. So your Q4 is due Friday, June 15th, which is through June 30th expense, or through May 31st expenses. I'll send you the file May 31st. Send me what you have through on June 15th so we can kind of catch up. And then on July 13th, anything else that has posted, your accounts payable will be booking payables. It shows on your ledger like an expense, but they don't actually do the transactions until in July. If you talk to somebody in your business office, they could maybe explain it and show it to you on your reports of how this is going to look. So that's why the two difference. And then in addition, I need that match report. So it's kind of by your July 13th report, that's the done deal. That's everything. You should have spent 90% of your grant when you send me that report July 13th. If you haven't done it when you send the June 15th report, you still have time to backdate those expenses a couple more weeks to pull your stuff together. Maybe you have an expense somewhere else that qualifies for this. They can do journals and things like that. It's really for you to get a good picture and take a look and make sure you have all your expenditures up to 90% or as close as you can get at that point. That's why because if you don't start looking at it until July 10th, you're not going to have time to coordinate this with your business office. So it's giving you a little bit, you have to look at it, get me something by June, then you know where you're at, and you have a couple more weeks to get more expenditures and to utilize more of your grant.
And also, just a word of advice, by July, they're already busy trying to close off books there at your local college, so it'd probably be best to even talk to them before that activity that they're going to start there at your local institution, because they're going to be busy trying to close your college's books. So you want to get ahead of the game as best as possible. So thank you. That was exactly what I think was clarifying that one question.
Okay.
A couple of small questions that came up.
Can I just jump in for 1 second? The thing that really comes out of this conversation that we've just had is the importance of getting moving on this spending right now, because it literally will take you the next 6 months to get to the point where your books are up to date and where you've spent as much as possible. So any equipment orders, any large expenditures that you haven't got in the works yet, just beware, you may not be able to complete them in the time that we have because these systems are so slow. So just to reiterate, get spending now. Yeah, because the maximum you will be able to carry over is 10% of your budget. So if you do not spend it, it will be gone. So that's just another encouragement.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
it's a challenge. I understand. I'm right there with you. I mean, it's, you know, our accounts payable is frantically working in July, and all us accountants are you done yet? Are you done yet? Is that it? And, you know, they have to have a cutoff date. So they will probably send you an email. This is it. This is the drop dead date. If you don't get it to us by this date, it's not going to be in that year. So I would be very keenly looking out for those emails. Make sure you're on your college's distribution for when those dates occur. And also to the CalCard thing, that was a big thing for the seed grant. Is, you know, if it takes 2 months, now you know that. So let's plan for it ahead of time. I'm really trying to thoughtfully get these due dates out there so you guys can get your head around, you know, okay, I have to now work with the business office because it is such a short timeline for the entire grant. And I have reporting too, and we need to show progress as well. So that's why there's so many due dates and all these rules and things. So
I think a couple of easy last questions here as we wrap up this hour. Very simple ones. How long do you recommend that they keep the fiscal documents for audit purposes?
Normally it's 2 years after audit.
2 years, okay.
Yes.
That's
So
yeah.
there's probably a storage or whatever you do there, or a scan doc. Yeah, your college should have document retention guidelines there, but at least 2 full fiscal years after it's been audited. So basically 3 years after the fiscal year ends.
Yeah, and there's local policies they can look at their local institutions.
Yes.
There's also another one, the matching of the Dropbox accessibility versus the ones who are receiving the email notifications. There seems to be a discrepancy on those lists. And so that's something that maybe we can take as a feedback to look at, so they can verify that the people on the email list getting the notifications are the same ones in the Dropbox.
Yeah. If you guys want, I have requested a contact sheet. That sheet's also in Dropbox. I have gotten a lot of staff changes at your colleges. I try to keep up on them. If you need somebody to get something from me, just send me an email. I'm happy to send it to them. I kind of made my own Outlook address tab for each college, because if I just blast everything out to everybody, you already get a million emails if it's just for one college. So I'm trying to keep up the tab for, each individual college and use that email. If I'm missing somebody, then just shoot me an email, let me know. I will add them. I can easily add them to the Dropbox. I can send them the file request link, email, whatever. So I'm trying to keep up on that. Like I said, there's 118 people already in there. So as staff changes, if I don't hear about it until later, then, and if I'm sending you an email and it's no longer relevant to you, send me one back and I will remove you from my Outlook. I will be honest, I'm keeping my own contact list aside of Smart Sheets, because I can just go right into Outlook, click on your college, and send an email just to the people there at your college. So if I've sent it to somebody incorrectly, then just let me know and I will try to fix that. But just try to be patient. I'm sending a lot of emails and trying to keep everybody straight to myself.
And I think the last question, which I think maybe goes for any of the panelists that are joining us, when will there be an opportunity to demonstrate the need for additional funding for the initiative? And I'm assuming this is for year 2 funding, because year 1 is pretty much already set for every college based on the award. And as Tony mentioned, anything above the award would really be your college's in-kind. So additional funding, that process for year 2, as Tony mentioned, will come around May timeframe, where there'll be another project plan submitted. And I don't know if Deborah or Carol wants to chime in for that particular additional funding that's for year 2. But year 1 funding is really pretty much your award as is. But unless there's anything else that anyone wants to chime in regarding the awards for year 1 or year 2.
Hi, Solomon. I don't know if you can see my image here. I'm not sure how I'm showing up on the screen for everybody. So Sarah's asking if there are unspent funds for year 1, can those be reallocated in some way? That's a great question. And we don't know the answer to that yet. We won't know how everyone's spending is going until Tony will have a better picture when your Q3 numbers come in and we know where everybody stands. So we don't have a plan for that yet until we know how active everyone is in working on their work plan and spending their dollars.
Well, and I want to add to that. I mean, if we make a commitment of your full award and 10% carryover, we may not even have a better picture of that until the fiscal year's completed. I'm hoping to, like I said, we're only at 8% expenditures right now, but we won't know for sure until till the final. And we've already committed the 10% in carryover. I'm sure everybody's going to request that. So yeah, maybe even be a discussion for June, July when we have, because I don't know that some of you like have no expenses. So I don't know. I mean, maybe, but I would hate to commit it and then at the last quarter 4, they send their whole 90% in and we thought, oh, you didn't spend anything. So yeah, but as soon as we can get that information, as soon as I can get that information compiled and out, our team's working on that and we're keeping that mindful.
I think, Deborah, if you want to talk a little bit how we will definitely review the quarterly reports, and I know part of it is also your fiscal expenditure that we want to make certain that you're online and expending your award, because definitely, as Tony and Carol discussed, the idea of funds that aren't expended, what to do with that would be a different situation that we'd be discussing.
Right.
Yeah, just so you know, Sarah, this is something that we have been discussing at length, because it is our goal to support the colleges and to get these resources out to people as quickly and as effectively as possible. So yeah, we at the same time, we also appreciate that spending money in these projects is sometimes difficult because you might be waiting on facilities before you can, you know, you can't do one thing until the other's complete. So we expect that the expenditure is going to really climb in the 3rd and 4th quarter. So we don't want to offer something that we can't, we can't follow through on, which is why we're taking a bit of a wait and see approach. But yeah, it is our goal to spend all of this money within the next year and a half, and we want to make sure that it goes to people who are actually getting the work done. So the work plans for year 2 are really important, and we'll do our best to support everyone as best we can.
Okay, great. If there's no other questions, I think I've looked at the different sources. I think I'm done with questions. Any last closing remarks, Tony?
No, thank you. And just thank you for giving me this opportunity to get outside of my box and do this with you and your patience. It's actually been fun. I mean, it's developing something from start to finish. So I'm enjoying being able to do something different. And I thank you for your patience when I ask you questions. And you guys are all working together with me. Everybody out there is awesome, and I really appreciate it. So, and if you didn't ask a question, just send me an email. If you think of something, somebody else has the same question, I guarantee it. So send me an email. And I'm trying to use the workplace too. I've put a couple things up on there. So maybe you see my posts. I don't know if you have to follow me or what, but if I think of something good, then I put it up there. I'm not super creative, but like I said, I'm trying to get outside of my box. So thank you for letting me do this.
Cool.
Thanks very much, everyone. That was great. It's good to see so many people attending the webinar. We'll post this within the next 24 hours on the website. You'll see it under the resources. And I'll also put the link in Workplace. So you can, if you know someone who should become familiar with this information, please pass it on to them. And we look forward to seeing you next week, where the next webinar will be on internships. Salomon, is there anything you wanted to mention about that before we go?
Now, there'll be some documentation that I'll be sending out that they're going to be going through. So it's probably best that you review that documentation beforehand. But it's going to be intense, so get ready. But again, if you have any questions regarding the Career Catalyst contract, which in itself it's its own logistical process, please let me know if I can help move that through your college. There's some questions that many folks have answered. There's an FAQ that has been growing exponentially, so check that out. If you haven't seen the link, let me know and see if those answers will address your questions.
All right. Well, thanks very much, and we'll see everyone next week.